Today we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series. We're looking at the 30th place team from the NHL's regular season, the Seattle Kraken. We're going to review their first regular season and take a look at what we'll expect from them in their first offseason. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're exploring the offseason for the upcoming Seattle Kraken here as they face their full first offseason after completing their first regular season. Of course, things didn't go all that well. There wasn't a lot of success, but they do have a lot of flexibility moving forward. We'll have to examine how things are likely going to play out in that regard. Now, of course, in case you're not familiar with this series here as of yet, this is the third video. We've completed Montreal and Arizona. We're working our way from the bottom of the standings all the way up to the top as we go. So we're going to recap the regular season, look at their salary cap situation, explore any expiring contracts as restricted or unrestricted free agents, and then we're going to ask ourselves and try to answer them, what are the top burning questions facing this franchise as we head into the summer. Now, to start up, let's first recap the very first inaugural season for the 32nd NHL franchise, the Seattle Kraken. So they finished with a record of 27-49-6 for 60 points. So, of course, nowhere near the success for the last expansion team, the Vegas Golden Knights, but I don't really think it was fair to expect that either. We knew going into the season that Seattle was going to have a whole different approach, and they had a whole different end game here, planning way more for the future, whereas Vegas was trying to get into win now mode as soon as humanly possible. Now, of course, they didn't have a lot of success on the ice. Special teams were not great. They had the 29th ranked power play in the NHL, 14.6%, and the 31st ranked penalty kill of 74.9. They didn't score a ton of goals. They were 29th in goal scoring, 213 goals for, while allowing 284 against, which was 24th best. So obviously, all in all, not a great season, and did make a few trades at the NHL deadline, but nothing too substantial. So now let's jump into the next phase of here, where we'll examine their salary cap space. We know Ron Francis was very conservative to make sure they had lots of cap flexibility during the first season, and they still are sitting in a pretty good situation that way. Based on contracts that are on the books for next year or beyond, which is 14 NHL contracts, they have used up a total of $59.6 million, which allows them $22.885 million in available salary cap space. So that's really, if you think about it, it's not a ton of money, because if you think about the 14 contracts, that means they're going to sign or replace anywhere from 6 to 9 players. That's not a ton of money per player, but obviously there's some other money and contracts that could be moved around as well to create more if need be. So now let's take a look at that contract situation going into next season. Who are the restricted and unrestricted free agents that either need to be signed or possibly replaced? Now, the RFA list is much longer here, and I think there's a decent possibility we'll see a fair bit of these players return, led by Ryan Donato. Of course, Donato himself recently made comments saying that there was no contract talks as of yet to remain with the Kraken, but he was hoping that he would be able to work something out to return. I think it's fair to say he had an okay season, but it was kind of up and down, not always getting a ton of playing time, but certainly pitched in with his fair share of offense. We also have Cole Lynn, the former Vancouver Canuck, Morgan Geekie, who came over from Carolina. Of course, Daniel Sprong, who seemed to be finding his way a little bit. He was traded. That was a deadline acquisition. So we'll see where Sprong fits longer term. Carson Kuhlman, of course, formerly of the Bruins. Will Borgen, who didn't play a ton, who had come over from Buffalo. Dennis Shalowski, and Cale Fleury as well. So some of these guys were kind of spare parts for them, if you will, and didn't really play on a regular basis. So it'll be interesting to see how Seattle views them and if they will qualify them or not going into next year. Of course, they're going to have their first full AHL affiliate team be ready to launch next year here as well. So they're going to need some bodies there. Now, the unrestricted free agents going into the offseason here include Victor Rask, Riley Sheehan, and Derek Pouliot. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if none of them returned. I would imagine Pouliot and Rask likely don't come back. Sheehan, probably not. You never know, I guess, but I would think that there's a good chance that they move on from all of the above in that scenario. Now let's look at the top burning questions facing the very first offseason for the Seattle Kraken after completing their first regular season here. Number one, they need to look at goaltending. They obviously came into the season with free agent signing Philip Grubauer and Chris Driedger, who was technically a free agent signing but counted for the expansion draft for the Florida Panthers selection. They were both have a good history. Driedger's history was a lot more limited, but really solid in Florida. Had a good run there after being a little bit of a late bloomer, so to speak. But Driedger has not lived up to the hype, getting a 3-year contract, $3 million and change. So I think it's a real possibility we'll see a Driedger trade. I think he still has some value. I know the team in front of him wasn't always very good, but still, I think he could have done better. Philip Grubauer really could have done better here as well. He got a much longer-term contract. I don't see him going anywheres. They've already announced as well, the Kraken, that their goaltending coach will not be back next year. So after one season, he's out, and they're going to be bringing in a new goalie coach. So I guess they're probably taking the approach, if you can't change the goalie, you're going to have to change the goalie coach. In this case, like I said, both guys kind of struggled for the most part this season. But I think they were both benefiting, I should say, from having stronger teams in front of them. Chris Driedger played for the Florida Panthers. Grubauer was with the Avalanche. They had some pretty good D in front of them. And now you're with an expansion team that's significantly weaker. It's not the same thing. And as much as they're both good goaltenders, they just didn't have the kind of season where you thought they could steal you a game from time to time a little bit more frequently, right? So wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a change in goal, and maybe if they can move Chris Driedger, which to me, I'm surprised, because when they brought in Driedger from Florida, I expected him to be the starter, and Grubauer was signed way after into free agency. That was a big surprise for me. I didn't think they would go that route, so I don't think they're going to want that much money tied up in goaltending, so it also makes sense to trade Driedger for that purpose too. Obviously, with Grubauer's contract, I don't see him moving anywhere, so that's a more likely scenario, I think. And the next big question to me is, are they going to be aggressive in free agency? Are they going to try to go through and find some other stronger players to step in and take this team to a new level and hopefully have more success next year? And I think to some degree the answer to that is going to be yes. I don't think they're going to be super aggressive, but we will see a little bit of that. There's a lot of speculation that they're going to be having their eye on John Klingberg, one of the top defensemen in the free agent crop coming up this year. Of course, not expected to re-sign in Dallas after a long drawn-out contract negotiation didn't end well, resulted in him requesting a trade. Of course, that trade never happened, so he's still there. But when free agency hits, it's pretty much a given that he's gone. And the Kraken appear to be pretty keen on bringing him into the fold. So that would be a step in the right direction to have that big right shot defenseman on the back end who can kind of help you on the power play and give you a little bit more offense. That would certainly be wise, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them go through a few other possibilities as well within the D or forward group too. I mean, they don't have a ton of prospects yet because they've only gone through one NHL draft. They did bring in Matty Beniers later into the season, who had a phenomenal short run to finish the season off. So he certainly has a ton of potential. He'll be, definitely a top 6 center for them next year as well, which is certainly good to see. They've got Yanni Gourde, a few other veteran guys that are signed longer term that are expected to do well. They signed Jaden Schwartz in the free agency last year. He's expected to be back next year. He had a bit of a tough season this year too. And of course, they extended Jared McCann, who had a real solid year leading them in goals. So that went well. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of free agency stuff, but Klingberg by far will be their main target in that regard. Of course, we have the draft lottery coming up. That's one of their top questions, is where are they going to be picking? Are they going to keep the pick, trade the pick, etc.? And knowing how Ron Francis likes to do things, to me, I'm going to say they're definitely keeping the pick unless they're blown away with a trade offer, which I just not really sure we're going to see happening. I mean, they're guaranteed top 5. If they went by standings, they'd be the 3rd best odds to win the draft lottery. So if they don't win spot 1 or 2 in the draw, then they can be bumped down to no lower than 5. So it depends on who those other 2 teams are. If it's the 2 teams ahead of them, like the Canadiens and the Coyotes, well, then they could end up in 3rd and remain there. It's hard to say. But you're looking at getting a real solid player in the top 5 spot. I mean, you would hope they'd have a little bit of luck. I mean, Shane Wright's likely going number 1. Beyond that, it's kind of difficult to say. I mean, you've got Logan Cooley. I would, kind of getting a lot of attention at the U18s. Of course, you've got Jiricek and Nemec, the top 2D. You got Slavkovsky, Kimmel, the Finn as well, getting a lot of attention also at the U18s. Like, there's some high-end talent there, and I'm not sure what they're going to do. A lot of it's going to be based on where they select. But I don't see them trading the pick. They're definitely going to make another high selection, would be my guess. And another burning question, too, in my opinion, is are they going to look back at the expansion draft and maybe wish they had a chance for a do-over and see if they could revisit any of those players? Because some of the players that they passed on were players that were made it known either by themselves or the teams that they wanted to be moved and were kind of made available with the intention of getting a top player off the books. I mean, we saw that with James Van Riemsdyk in Philadelphia. We saw that with Jacob Voracek, who ended up getting traded later. We saw that with Tarasenko in St. Louis, who seems to be happy now. So I don't think that he's going anywhere. But, Carey Price in Montreal, of course, he's got a whole different, scenario going on now with injuries. So, which actually was kind of apparent last year too, but way more knowledge of that situation now. So, there's a lot of players like that. I wonder if they would consider bringing in another veteran through trade that they could probably pick up cheaply. They also, if they don't put their cap space to use, will they maybe weaponize it a little bit and take on a bad contract to get some extra assets as well, because they'll certainly want to build up their prospect pool for the future. So right now, the way things are looking, I would suspect we're going to see a couple of good moves from the Kraken this offseason, between maybe a trade of a goaltender, maybe going into free agency, getting a top defenseman. I don't think we're going to see seismic moves. That's typically not the way Ron Francis operates. I think we're going to see them make the most of their draft picks, maybe get a signing in free agency, maybe make a trade or two, and come into next year with the hopes that they're going to be better. But I don't think they're going to be drastically better. I think we're still going to be talking about the Seattle Kraken in the draft lottery when we get to this point again next year. So let me know what your thoughts are. What do you expect on the Kraken in their first full offseason here? What were your thoughts on their first full regular season? What do you see them doing moving forward? Let me know your thoughts and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.